What I will say is that, and I said this right after the election, we have to remind ourselves we're on the same team. Vladimir Putin's not on our team.
President Obama giving his successor, Donald Trump, gentle advice about how to deal with the Russian president after the report of Kremlin interference in the U.S. election. And it's time now for our Sunday group. Laura Ingraham, editor of LifeZette, Fox News political analyst and columnist for The Hill, Juan Williams, Julie Pace, who covers the White House and the transition for the Associated Press, and Michael Needham, head of the conservative think tank Heritage Action for America. Well, Laura, as I was discussing with Reince Priebus and with Congressman Nunes, there are several things, all of which can be true, that the Russians did try to influence the campaign, that the Democrats are trying to use it to delegitimize Trump, and that Trump won the election fair and square. Where does this go from here, and how do you think Donald Trump needs to handle Russia and that whole relationship?
I think he has to handle it as pragmatically as I think he's going to handle the economy, which is eyes wide open. We've made a lot of mistakes in the past. I think Priebus made the point of our cybersecurity, both at the DNC and our own government, has been pathetic. We are way behind the curve on cybersecurity. I think you're going to hear Donald Trump launch an entirely new initiative that will be very transparent in what the government's going to do to beef it up. But look, I lived in the former Soviet Union. I've been in Russia like 7 times in the past 5 or 6 years. It does not surprise me in the least that Russia tried to influence the election. Not in the least. I mean, this is what they do. This is what the FSB does, the former KGB. It's what the military intelligence does over there. We've done the same thing in other countries. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it good. But I think what we have to understand at this point is Donald Trump's going to be the president. The country's either going to improve, get more united behind certain issues, or not. And the Democrats can kind of try to hang on to this. I don't know what purpose it's going to serve unless it results in better security for all of our systems across the board. But this report was 5 pages long, the declassified report. Byron York wrote a great piece about this. Lots of questions remain. They're 5 pages, broadly spaced. We don't know if Russia was trying to undermine Hillary or help Trump. We don't know exactly when the hacking really began or when the influence campaign began. We don't know if it's just garden variety propaganda. There are a lot of questions that remain. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. I think it should be taken seriously. But to hyperventilate that, oh, this means that Trump is going to be, in this palsy-walsy relationship with Putin, I don't see that. I think that's a facile way of looking at this.
Julie, I want to pick up on something that I discussed with Congressman Nunes. This isn't the first president who's come in thinking that he's going to get along and tame the Russian bear. Clinton did it. George W. Bush did it, looked into Putin's eyes. Obama with the reset. What do you think of the chances that they can turn a corner here, or in the end, will it all come to ashes as it did with his predecessors?
I think part of the reason you see new presidents come in and take this position that we want to try to start new with Russia is because I think everyone generally agrees it would be better if the United States and Russia had better relations. There isn't a lot of dispute about that. The question that I think Trump has to grapple with here is less about what he's going to do to try to improve relations and more about what he's going to need Putin to do. We hear a lot about the Obama administration not being tough enough, not acting quickly enough on hacking and cybersecurity. But what are Trump's measures going to be for Putin? What does he have to do vis-a-vis Assad in Syria? What does he need to do in terms of Russian meddling in Ukraine? I think that is going to be the larger question that will shape this relationship.
I want to turn dramatically to a story that everybody was horrified by and talking about this week, and that, of course, was the attack, and you see it there on camera. 4 blacks torturing a mentally disabled white man live on Facebook and forcing him to say hateful things. Here they are.
What? Donald Trump. White people, what?
Juan, I was thinking about this yesterday. I'm not sure what to ask you except, how on earth can this happen?
Well, it's just shocking, and it's primitive, it's savage, and on a very emotional level for me, it scares me that people can behave in this manner to each other and then put it on tape for broadcast.
On tape live.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I meant was broadcast it out, right? So I think, to me, it stirs up racial tensions already hot from the campaign rhetoric of Donald Trump about the Mexicans and the women and all the rest. And we live in a society now where immediately the response, the strong response online was to tie this somehow into Black Lives Matter, and you see this from the white nationalists who seem excited by Trump's election, to say that this is evidence of black racism, as if that would therefore legitimize acts of white racism. It becomes perverse, you know, everything, conversations about Dylan Roof, about a disabled black kid that was tortured, not on tape or live as you describe it. So we didn't know about that, but clearly there's something happening in the society that is deeply troubling on the level of race and difference. And the key here is, I think, as you know, for responsible people, including our president-elect, to act, to speak out and say very clearly that this is unacceptable.
We asked you for questions for the panel, and we got a lot of responses about this, including this on Facebook from Roddy Spaniel Shelley. Why is it more important to focus on politics in the crime than race? It was a racial hate crime. Say the words. It's finally time to call it what it is. Michael, how do you answer Roddy?
Well, I think this is the problem with hate crimes legislation in the first place. Look, what is problematic in the video that you saw is that it is despicable and it is torturing of a mentally disabled person. And I think for us, in a lot of what Juan was just saying in terms of talking about the racial aspects of this, we shouldn't have hate crimes legislation. We shouldn't be saying that if you torture somebody because of politics or you torture somebody because of race, that's worse than if you torture somebody live on camera because of money or just because you're a sick, depraved individual. And the additional problem with hate crimes legislation is that you're forcing, in this case it's very easy, they're saying on tape why they're doing it and what they're believing, but in many of these hate crimes cases, you're actually forcing a jury or a judge to get inside the mind of a depraved killer or torturer. And so I think we should be looking at the crime that was committed. We should be looking at the crime that's committed in all of these hate crimes, so-called hate crimes that are committed, and not putting people in jail because of their thoughts, but putting people in jail because of their actions. These were just depraved, disgusting actions.
You know, I think there's an added element that, you know, when you have people who are taking actions because of your race, religion, faith, ethnicity, immigrant status, whatever. And the whole idea behind hate crime legislation was that it would be additionally punitive. And I think these people should be punished to the absolute and fullest extent of the law.
So if somebody had paid money to these guys, so if somebody had just paid money to these guys and said, hey, I think it'd be really amusing to have a video on TV about this, that would have been less bad than in this case.
No, because it's the treatment of a guy who was a friend and who was mentally disabled, and that's the point. But I mean, when you come to a Dylan Roof killing, was it 9 or 10 black people in the church, again, I think your point is it's the action that counts. But I think when you add the racial element into it, I think it does factor in. It's a legitimate factor.
We have a next segment, 30 seconds.
I think there's a great point to be made about the aggravating factors of the hate crime. But Juan, in answering the question, we're all horrified by this. It's evil, depraved. But you mentioned white nationalists excited about Trump, and you mentioned Trump's comments about Mexicans. This is just an evil act. I mean, to throw in Obama, I would agree with you even. The whole Black Lives Matter conversation, who knows what that might have had an effect on it. But to mention Trump in the conversation about what they did, to me, just is completely off base.
They mentioned Trump, Laura.
Right, but they mentioned Trump negatively. You're also mentioning Trump negatively.
I don't think there's any question that there's racial tension around the comments that Donald Trump has made in his campaign.
And none of it was affected at all by what Barack Obama has done.
You're stealing time from yourself in the next segment, and we need to get to it.
Hands up, don't shoot.
Folk, you can all continue this conversation during our break. We need to take a break here.